Hey everybody, it's that time of year. It's December, which means it's time to look back at the previous year and start looking at possible candidates for Game of the Year. On our most recent episode, we asked you for your nominees, your thoughts for Game of the Year. But as I started looking back, considering possible nominees, I found myself lacking much in the way of candidates and started reevaluating just how I was treating Game of the Year. Thinking instead about treating it the way more Time magazine treats Person of the Year, as not necessarily the best person or the one that did the most good, but as the one that had the most influence on the world that past year. And as such, I've been considering some very unlikely candidates for Game of the Year, chief amongst them being Star Wars Battlefront 2 EA. From a certain point of view, it makes a lot of sense. Battlefront 2 was the game that caused everyone to finally get fed up with loot boxes. Other games like Overwatch had used them, but normally could argue they were only cosmetic. Some games went further with actual pay-to-win mechanics in things like Forza 7 and NBA 2K18, but audiences for these games don't have the size and scope that a AAA's game with the Star Wars name on it can offer. Combine that with the original Battlefront being a rushed mess designed to coincide with the release of Force Awakens, and Battlefront 2 having a rather lackluster single-player campaign and hitting the market before The Last Jedi, and it stirs up all sorts of old frustrations with a company that has the resources to do better and an IP that most fans will feel deserves better. What fans ultimately got felt more like an insult, a hastily thrown together cash grab designed to make as much money as possible from a popular intellectual property that EA shelled out a pile of money for, no doubt, and felt entitled to equally massive returns from. That's ultimately key. EA acted like they were entitled to all your money, rather than feeling the need to give you anything for that. The fact that they produced anything, it seemed, was justified enough grounds for them to have your money, rather than having to put any effort, time, or thought into giving fans the game they ultimately deserved. However, even looking at the problem from this new perspective, I don't think I can recommend Star Wars Battlefront 2 for Game of the Year. Now, as to exactly why, it's going to take me a minute to break this down, so stick with me while I lay out my case, all mixed metaphors aside. The unmatched greed on display from EA DICE led to an overwhelming negative response to a game that was initially seen as an opportunity for EA to make it up to Star Wars fans and gamers for the original Battlefront EA. Now, combine that with every subsequent justification and statement from EA sounding like so much garbage. Like the statement from CFO Blake Jorgensen that cosmetics were not an option because you can't violate canon. I mean, not only is that absurd on the face of it, in a game where you can fight battles from the original trilogy and the prequels that need not be named, using characters from Force Awakens, canon be damned, is shown to be so much self-serving lies when enterprising nerds dove into the game's code and found cosmetic customization options already in the game. If not caught, I have no doubt EA would have come out in a few weeks and said they'd listened to fans, and they were now bringing out loot boxes again with purely cosmetic items, as that's the only way they'd be able to reintroduce them without a massive blowback. Besides that, imagine if they'd introduced genuinely cool customization. Jorgensen threw out the idea of a pink Darth Vader as a sort of straw man, but honestly, I don't have a problem with a pink Darth Vader other than the fact that it's the laziest kind of customization. I mean, just palette swapping the original design. Way to reach for the stars there, EA. But imagine if they'd put in some really cool stuff, like some of the concept art that showed Vader as more of a samurai type character. Now imagine that within the game and you could play as Samurai Vader. How cool would that be? Thankfully though, they didn't go that route, because who knows how long it would have taken for us to reach this tipping point. But make no mistake, this is not over. The industry itself can still pull out of this, letting EA DICE take the hit. They'll go and introduce things like self-regulation and industry standards and other meaningless platitudes. In fact, at present, it seems unlikely that EA is going to take much of a hit at all without any further action. Sure, poor press reviews of a game that should have been a big moneymaker even without loot boxes will damage the company. And lots of people in recent days have been enjoying the schadenfreude of EA stock dropping about 15 points at the end of November, equating to literally billions of dollars in revenue. But EA stock is already beginning to rebound in recent days, with a lot of investors seeing it as an opportunity to grab up stock on the cheap relative to short-term future expectations. After all, if it can drop 15 points in a few days, it can go back up just as quickly when everybody forgets about this. In addition, EA stock is still up over 30 points from a year ago, even after the drop, so the company is still well in the black, and any long-term investor looking at this won't be scared away by some bad press that'll be gone in a few months. This brings me to my reason that I did not choose Battlefront 2 as my Game of the Year. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. Yes, there are politicians in the US expressing concern about loot boxes and government committees looking into them internationally, but nothing has happened yet. This sort of thing happens all the time with every issue, and 9 times in 10, nothing happens. A report is written, findings announced, and life goes on. One more binder is added to a committee filing cabinet, and that's the sum of all the frustrations and outrage everyone felt when that report was initially commissioned. In fact, financial analysts seem of the opinion that this is exactly what will happen moving forward. Morgan Stanley reported recently that it expects sales of Battlefront 2 EA to mirror its predecessor, and believes that while this may lead to, quote, monetization fatigue, unquote, and cause, quote, extra digital content to slow, unquote, it does not seem to think that this is the final nail in the coffin of this endless greed parade we've all been subjected to so far. So what can we do at this point? My best advice, stay angry. In the months ahead, more games will be rolled out with loot boxes, and many will try to cover themselves with the just cosmetic fig leaf, but every time they do, every time there are needless cosmetic loot boxes or some shoehorned in online component, remember this feeling. Remember Battlefront 2. Remember the anger you felt. Remember the insult it was to franchise fans and gamers alike. Remember the condescending platitudes and excuses we got from the likes of Jorgensen and EA about how they had to put in pay-to-win mechanics because cosmetic changes would upset the fans, as though there was some gun to their head requiring loot boxes in the first place. Every time a game is announced, at E3 or PAX or BlizzCon or any other major video game event, I want everyone to remember the outrage they feel right now. As I said, this is far from over, and the industry isn't going to change if it can avoid it. If something is going to force that change, it's going to require us to hold on to this moment, to refuse to get over it and move on until the industry has shown they've done so first. Remember this moment. Remember the outrage. Remember Battlefront 2. Thanks for listening, everybody. Like and subscribe. Let us know what you think should be Game of the Year on our Facebook page or on Twitter using the hashtag LTRGOTY. That's Loot the Room Game of the Year, LTRGOTY. Let me know what you think about what I've said. Am I overreacting? Am I being reasonable? Am I being hyperbolic? Probably more than a little bit, but I feel like it's necessary at this point. And as always, you can email us or find us on Facebook, loottheroompod@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, everybody. Hunt the Wampus.